Welcome to this segment of Introduction to Native Plant Gardening in Central Arizona. This segment will focus on the major plant groups in our low desert, with a particular emphasis on those that support pollinators. This workshop is brought to you by the Maricopa Native Seed Library, a service of the Maricopa Community Colleges. So the groups that we'll be talking about, the plant groups, include 4 large families: cacti, grasses, legumes, and the composites, as well as some other groups that are important to wildlife. Bear in mind that this is not an all-inclusive list of plants in Central Arizona or plant groups, and in fact leaves out quite a few things, but this is really just an overview of some of the major groups and those that are of most significance to pollinators. So let's talk about the cacti. There's over 300 species in the Sonoran Desert and over 80 species in Maricopa County. That's from a county flora project where they've inventoried the plants in Maricopa County. Some of the examples are saguaro, prickly pear, and hedgehog cacti. The cacti are overwhelmingly pollinated by bees, not honeybees, but native solitary bees, and many are actually specialists on cacti. The growing conditions for cacti are very low water and full or filtered sun. In particular, when they're young, many need filtered sun. They need protection from sun, including saguaro. And out in the wild, plants that protect saguaros are referred to as nurse plants, and those consist of desert trees such as ironwood and palo verde. And many of our cacti do best in some filtered sun. Filtered sun is sun that's filtered from large trees overhead, so not deep shade, but filtered sun, sunlight coming in through the small leaves of desert trees. And when you're buying cacti in pots to transplant at home, the best nurseries will mark the south side of the pot so you know how to orient it, because the south side is a little more adapted to sun, having grown in that, compared to the north side of the plant. There are over 200 species of grasses in Maricopa County, and some of our native grasses are the grama grasses, which are like a type of bunch grass, deer grass, and threon grasses. The grasses have 3 different types of growth forms: bunch grass, annual, or functioning more like a shrub. The bunch grasses grow in a clump, and they will die back to the roots under drought or other stress. The annuals can complete their entire life cycle in one season, sometimes as short as 6 weeks. For example, 6 weeks threon goes from germinating of seed to death of the plant in only 6 weeks. And then some of the longer-lived grasses function more like shrubs. They will die back to some nodes along the stems under drought, but otherwise are persistent. And we know that grasses are a large component of our diets worldwide in terms of the grains, the wheats, and all the other types of grains. But they're also locally important as graze. And what's sometimes surprising to folks is that grasses serve as a host plant for butterflies, meaning that butterfly caterpillar live on grasses, some grasses, it depends on the butterfly species, during their caterpillar stage. We'll talk more about larval host plants in another segment. That will be an important concept for gardening with pollinator plants. Generally, grasses are full sun and low water users. The legumes, there's over 100 species in Maricopa County, and these include a lot of our sort of signature trees, our mesquites, our ironwoods, and our palo verdes, but also include many types of shrubs and even some of our annual wildflowers, the lupins. Many are nectar plants, so a lot of our pollinators rely on them for nectar when they're flowering. And many are also larval host plants, meaning that butterfly caterpillars live out that part of their life cycle on certain types of legumes, which we'll talk further about in another segment specific to pollinators. many of our legumes are considered keystone species. That means species that provide an outsized impact to the environment in relation to their numbers. So mesquite is considered a keystone because of all the benefits it provides to wildlife. And if keystone species are removed, there's an impact, a detrimental impact to the environment, significant. Another reason that a lot of the legumes are considered keystones is also that they fix nitrogen. So what this means is they actually have bacteria that live in their roots in a symbiotic relationship, a beneficial relationship, where that bacteria can take atmospheric nitrogen and convert it into a form in the soil that can be used by plants, which, as you can imagine, is very beneficial because it enriches the soil for all other types of plants. The legumes are typically full sun and low water species. The composites are one of the largest flowering families worldwide. And what is their defining feature is that what appears to be actually one flower head is really a cluster of many flowers, often called ray and disc flowers. There are over 260 species in Maricopa County, and because there's so many and they're often yellow, they're often referred to as darn yellow composites because they're very difficult to tell apart from each other, and they hybridize some of them as well, making it even more complicated. So you can see in the pictures there's a variety of yellow composites, but I did also include the purple aster. That's a native aster to remind us that they're not always yellow. And then on the bottom right is pink Peresia. So a lot of composites are important nectar plants. Some are larval host plants for butterflies. And also many provide other types of food, particularly seed, bird seed, food for birds. And these are also typically low water, full sun plants. The agaves consist of about 12 species in Maricopa County, and Agave americana and Parry's agave are two examples. Pictured is Agave americana, one of the largest of the agaves. The agaves are actually bat pollinated, and they're also of great cultural and ethnobotanical significance to many local native peoples. These plants are used in food and in medicinal contexts, so they're very valuable. They are low water plants, but some need sun protection. I find Agave americana will be fine in a full sun environment, but many of the other smaller agaves really need filtered sun, especially in the summer. Otherwise, they will get sunburned, turn red or brown, and usually not make it. There are also several other related plants, the yuccas, the nolinas, and hesperaloes, which are all important to wildlife and could also deserve a space in the home landscape. This is a list of other important groups of plants for pollinators. And there will be a follow-up workshop that gets into more depth about this, but this is really just a kind of a starter list if you're interested in adding some more plants that will support bees, butterflies, and other pollinators in your yard. The mustards are butterfly host plants. Sumacs are moth host plants, which are also important pollinators and provide a nectar source. Many people are familiar with milkweeds because they are host plants for monarch butterflies and queens, but they're also a very good nectar source, so they're also supporting other pollinators at the same time. The evening primroses have a designation of special value to native bees from the Xerxes Society. They produce a lot of nectar. They're used heavily by bees. They're also used by moths. These are plants that bloom in the evening. The buckwheats are also a high value to bees, and they're moth and butterfly host plants. So you can see that as you look through this list, most of these groups of plants have more than one value to wildlife and to pollinators. So that's why they're really considered important in the garden. Same thing there with mallows, like globe mallow is a really good example. And then the final bullet point there, the justicias, ruellias, and desert honeysuckle are all hummingbird pollinated. So these are excellent plants to include in a garden to attract hummingbirds. Here's some Here are the references used in this segment of the workshop. And thank you. Please contact us at the Maricopa Native Seed Library at our web address or email. There are several other segments that can be viewed related to this topic. One that looks at why we might incorporate native plants in the yard, another that looks more specifically at the pollinators, and a third segment that looks at gardening techniques in the low desert of central Arizona. Thank you.